Hey guys, welcome back to another Honda Nighthawk episode. Hope you guys enjoyed the last episode and are ready for another episode relatively quickly after the last one. Now I do have the bike out of frame right now just because there's a lot more installed on it than was supposed to be for this episode. I kind of forgot to record an intro, so I'm doing it after the fact a couple days later. Now in this episode we will be installing the exhaust pipes, we will be removing the old clutch material and adding in new clutch packs, and then what else did we do in this episode? All right, what did we do? All right, I'm gonna level with you. This carburetor absolutely sucked to install. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This was easily the most difficult carburetor I've ever worked on. This guy's got a really good point. You should make some videos about this thing. Oh yeah, the carburetors. How could I forget about the carburetors? You'll see why I can't forget about the carburetors here in a little while, but stay tuned for this episode and I hope you guys enjoy. Alright, so here's the thing. I rebuilt these over 2 years ago and I don't know how well of a job I did. I don't know if I just opened it up and sprayed things out. I took one of the pilot jets out because they were easy to get to, and I noticed a lot of crud on it. So I'm thinking I may not have removed all the jets, and I know for a fact I definitely didn't set the bowl height. So I'm here. It's relatively easy to do. I've done it like 1,000 times. I might as well just do it right and do it once. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of rebuild these yet again. So, well, here we go again. Here's carb number 1. There we go. Carb 1 is done. I will say the floats were set correctly, but the idle jet, the pilot jet, and the main jets were all a little gunky, so I am glad I took it back apart to clean. So I'll just go ahead and quickly do the next 3. All right, so carbs are a little bit rebuilt. I think that there was a little bit of grime, not a terrible amount, but it was good to reset the pilot screws. They were all out of whack, so clean them out. Just gave it a once over to make sure everything looked okay. I am going to get this ready to mount to the engine. Now I did do a quick mock-up with one of the boots and the front boots on the front of the carburetor that mount to the engine, and it looks like with this air box it moves back just enough that I can actually get this all in here without having to worry about things not fitting over each other. So I'm going to get that prepped and ready for install, but before I do, I have the throttle and choke cables that I want to install first, because otherwise it's going to be a pain in the butt trying to mount that hardware after the carburetor is installed. As you can see, I don't have any of that mounted, but I think loosely installing those cables will help out a lot. All right, so I've got my boots on. They were a little bit difficult to do. Also, I'm going to show a picture here real quick. There was this weird clip on like the back of the boots. I don't really know what they were for. They were in the crease that's supposed to run into the seal onto the airbox itself. I pushed them back and out of the way so that they're inside here. If you have any idea what they're for, just let me know. But I'm gonna go ahead. I've got some WD-40 in the boots. I may have to get my heat gun just to make these a little bit more pliable. We'll see how it goes, but I'm just gonna go ahead and get this sucker in here. I think these need to go over here. It's like you need an extra 1/8 of an inch here. They couldn't have done that for you? No, they were like, oh, we're Honda. We like to make everything complicated. Nothing is ever easy when it comes to carbs. Ever. I have yet to meet an engineer who was like, oh, I designed the best carb system in the world. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Nope. All right, I'm gonna level with you. This carburetor absolutely sucked to install. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This was easily the most difficult carburetor I've ever worked on in terms of installation, and probably the most difficult thing I've ever worked on when it came to a motorcycle. I've torn this engine apart, I've done electrical diagnosis on this motorcycle, but installing this carb sucked. If you have a friend that ever comes up to you and is like, hey, I need to install an early 80s Nighthawk carburetor setup, get a new friend, because they're just gonna make your life a living hell. I usually don't do rants and I usually don't do how-to portions in these videos, but because this sucked so much, I want to at least walk other people through what you have to do in order to do this so that you don't have to go through the same crap that I did and waste basically 4 hours struggling with this thing. So I'm going to take a deep breath, take a step back, and then I'm going to show you what steps you need to do in order to get this done. Okay, so I'll try to keep this relatively brief. When I first tried to install the carburetors, I tried to have the boots installed in the air box and these engine boots, I'll call them, already installed on the carburetors, and then slide it in and then bolt these guys with this all attached to the engine. That did not work out. There is just no feasible way to get everything lined up in here with the gaskets behind the boots and these screws so that you can get everything attached. Somehow, if you magically manage to do that, you have barely any room to get an Allen key or any kind of flex head Allen key in here to tighten these down. All this is in the way. There's ones that are back here behind these oil pipes that you quite literally just cannot get to, and it's such a pain. So I pulled the carb back off. I think the boots came with it. I just installed just these boots with the bolts into them, into the engine. I did actually have to loosen this oil pipe in order to get to this bolt down here and this bolt over here. Otherwise, it's just very difficult and I didn't want to break anything. So after installing that, I went through hell and high water trying to figure out the order of this. This airbox does not move this direction forward enough so that you can put the boots in here first and then pull them onto the carburetor. Maybe it's just mine, I don't know, but I have a feeling that that's not the case. You have to first not connect them to the airbox, but pull this forward, mount it to the front of the carburetor, tighten these suckers down as tight as you can, because I can't tell you how many times I would pull them forward to try and get in the airbox and they would pop off. There's a little lip that's in the middle of the carb seating area right here. You need to get over the middle lip. It's like almost like a ridge. Otherwise, it will not secure down tightly enough. Once you get that done, you somehow need to force this thing into this box. Now keep in mind, I had talked earlier, there was some weird retaining clip that was inside the sealing lip. I folded that backwards so it's pointing inside this air box so that it wasn't getting stuck on the lip or holding anything up. Then what I do was I grabbed a hot air gun, I heated these suckers up, I sprayed them with WD-40, and I just pulled this air box absolutely as far forward as I could, and I slowly worked around trying to get these two to seat into each other. Chances are, if you have an old air box boot like mine, that lip is pretty deformed. I would suggest before installing this, you try and form it back as smooth as you possibly can, just so that it's easier getting that seal to seat in. I don't think I have a perfect 100% seal around this thing, but there is no chance I can get this any better. If this airbox could come forward even another 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, or if this boot was another 1/4 or 1/2 inch longer, your life would be so much better. But because, for whatever reason, this doesn't want to shift forward anymore, and I've already you can't see it, but I've already maxed out the distance on the rear mounting bolts. It is extremely difficult to get this to all stick in here. And I would not even suggest trying to do this without first installing your throttle and choke cables, just because it would be an absolute nightmare. You can still kind of get to the fuel line, and you can also kind of get to the breather lines, so you don't have to worry too much about that. But if you needed to do anything else on this, your best bet is just pulling it all off and doing it in the order that I talked about, because otherwise I don't know how you're supposed to do this. So I hope this helps someone somewhere down the line, but anyway, that's what I had to do to get these carbs installed. All right, so next up is the oil filter. Since I'm here, it takes a CH6012, which is actually the same filter that was in the Kawasaki Concours. It's made by Fram. They also have it by STP. It goes by a couple different companies. I think K&N calls it the K&N 401, but it's all pretty much the same filter. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this ready for install now. Okay, so now I've got the oil cooler hung, and these two lines need to pop into here, and the other side, and 2 O-rings and 2 bolts goes with each one. O-rings look fine, so I'm just going to reuse them, though I do have spares if needed. Oh, much better. It's like I can actually get to what I'm doing. I'm like that stupid carburetor. Okay. That was weird. All right, well, oil cooler and oil filter done. I'll tighten these up and I'm good to go. All right, so next I was thinking about doing the exhaust. I was actually polishing it up back there, but I think since I have this area readily accessible, I'm going to do the clutch. Just the clutch friction materials. I picked this up quite a number of years ago, like everything for this bike, and it's just removing these bolts. It should be loosening up a cage and some springs, taking it all out, swapping out the material, putting it back in. One thing to note is in the manual, it talks about this stuff being on the left side of the engine. I do not know why, but it is most definitely underneath this case cover, so let me get started on that. Interesting. Oh, that smells like transmission. All right, these bolts have to come off and then this can slide out. Okay, now it says crisscross pattern. Remove these bolts. And I think you're supposed to have a tool to hold the cage. I guess you don't necessarily need that. I'm going to assume to tighten it you probably do, but we'll see. And then I think this is supposed to just come out. Yep. Steel plate and clutch material. Ooh, that is gone. Let's try and get this all out in order. Oh, well, When it comes out as a giant blob, that's pretty easy. Okay, that doesn't look that bad. Ooh, that I'm just gonna leave in there. Let's take a look at this and maybe clean some of it up and get ready for new parts. Okay, so each clutch material is supposed to be 3.2 to 3.38 with a wear limit of 2.6. And this first one, wow, 3.2, I'm very surprised. I thought that this would be all gone. I'm going to be replacing it anyway because I'm here, but yeah. All right, so let's just flip everything over. Three point two. 3.2. 3.2. Wow, okay. All right, well, maybe they didn't need new clutches, but I'm here. It's easy to do. I'm just going to go ahead and swap them out. I'm going to put it back in order so I don't get confused, and then clean up a little bit. I'm going to soak these clutches in some new oil for a little bit, and then I'll clean this up some and get ready to reinstall everything. All right, so I've had these plates soaking for about an hour. I cleaned up some of the other parts, so I'm gonna get ready for reinstall. It's gonna go clutch plate, clutch plate, clutch plate. So I'm going to attempt to do this in the same order that it came off in. So we'll do, this is gonna be very messy. Clutch. Plate. Okay, so it should end on a clutch, which it does. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clutch materials, which it is. All right, I just need to line these splines up, slide this back in. That's relatively close. This is not going to be easy, but whatever. Maybe I should just put them in one by one. No, had it lined up wrong. Okay. Well, that's that. Let's get the springs and bolts ready to go back in now. Okay, so it turns out that there's actually an alignment mark on the outside of this case and then an alignment mark on the inside. So I happened to be reading the manual about this to see if it said anything, but when I shifted it over to the correct position, it was easier to get the bolts in, and I believe this actually locks up when you go to tighten it. So this should be easier to tighten as well as easier to possibly torque it down. So let's see. Also, when trying to tighten these before, I smacked on this thing and now my finger's all swollen up. It's odd, but whatever. All right, yeah, so it turns out you can actually tighten it when you do things the correct way. So let me get a torque wrench, 96 foot-pounds, so that's inch pounds. God, that'd be awful. I'd be stripping things all over the place. So that's 8 foot-pounds, so I think that seems reasonable. Okay, that's all tight. I'm just going to confirm I don't actually have a torque spec in here for those, which is very strange, but it is what it is. I assume it's because the springs take care of it, but the only torque specs is clutch lockout nut, which is inside there, clutch hose union bolts, which is for the master cylinder, pivot nut, which I don't know where that is, and then slave cylinder bleed valve, which is up there somewhere. So that's pretty much it. I got the cover cleaned up. I'm going to reinstall that. I do need to repaint these letters back in, but for now, it's all right. All right, that's it. One set of clutch packs swapped out. All right, so now that I've got the clutch done, I think that's pretty much everything large that needs to get installed except for the gas tank and the mufflers, which would require other pieces being off. So I am going to now tackle installing the mufflers, which needed a little bit of legwork in terms of getting a little bit polished. They look pretty bad. Obviously, they're not going to look perfect. They're very old. They've got some dings and rust spots, but figured I could at least make them look a little bit more presentable. So anyway, I'm going to get prepped and ready. I have to install new exhaust gaskets in the back of the engine, and then I can go ahead and try and work on finagling this into the bike. Well, funny enough, I actually need that 30mm socket again to drive the new exhaust gaskets back in. The old ones are flat. You're supposed to not reuse them, so I don't know if I have to actually tap them in, but nope, I don't. Never mind, I do not need my father's 30mm socket anymore. So, LOL, JK. Oh, this is going to be impossible. Okay, and then it says when installing the exhaust, it's got these little retaining clip bits that go around the exhaust pipe, and it says a tip to keep them all together so they don't keep falling down and you're trying to do this weird puzzle situation is tape them with regular cellophane tape, not painter's tape, not packing tape, just regular tape, and that is supposed to keep them together so they don't fall all over the place. And then it's also supposed to just burn off, which I'm sure they wrote this before we cared about the environment, but it makes sense to me. Anything to make my life a little bit easier. Okay, got them all mocked up. Now I'm going to attempt to get 2 of them lined up, and I don't know, see what happens. All right, let's try this again. Pro tip, when you have your copper gaskets, tap them lightly with a hammer just to deform them just enough so that they stick in and they don't fall out. And then also you want to make sure the sealing guys actually can go over the screws. I remember when I took this off before, I had bent one of them, so I had to go back and tap that and adjust it a little bit. So yeah, basically just make sure you do it right, and then you'll be fine, no issues whatsoever. I don't know why I don't always just do it that way the first time, but such is life. I know this is not the perfect angle, but at least if I can get it sort of started, then it's much easier to manage. Like if I get one side started and I can pivot the other to get it into the right spot. All right, so nothing's ever easy. Unfortunately, I snapped this stud off. I'm not sure if that stud was on an angle or something else. The book says 20 foot-pounds. These bolts are awfully thin. So as I'm tightening it up, all of a sudden it snaps and pulls out. Luckily, I have plenty of material back there so that I can get that stud out, probably, and then probably turn a new one in, but I'm not gonna deal with that for right now. I loosened and then retorqued all the bolts. None of them had hit 20 foot-pounds yet, so I loosened them all up and then just torqued them down to 7, which I think is a little bit better for this thread pitch and size. So I'm gonna leave it like that. Hopefully it doesn't leak. If it does, I'll deal with it for a little bit, and at some point, luckily enough, this is easy enough to get back off. I'll pop this out, see if I can weld a nut on the end, pull it out. Luckily, it's one on the outside and it's not one way on the inside. I can get to this relatively easily. So like I said, I'm just gonna leave it for right now, and hopefully it doesn't leak too bad. Now I'll go ahead and get the rest of the hardware all mounted up. So I kind of forgot to record an outro for the last video, so some of these things may look a little bit more far along than they actually are, but anyway, in this episode we did the muffler, the carburetor, which sucked, and then swapping out the clutch packs. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I hope you're enjoying the motivation and the continuation of this series as I go along. I'm really curious to see how that exhaust muffler holds up, the one that we broke the exhaust stud on, but I guess we'll see as time goes on. But anyway, like I said, hope you guys enjoyed it and stay tuned for future episodes. So I'll see you guys in the next one.